The sky burned orange and red as another city died. Ambassador pressed her face against the cold glass of the underground bunker and watched the distant flames rise into the darkness. Somewhere out there, millions of her people were screaming. She could not hear them from this depth, but she felt them. Every death was a wound in her heart. They had lived on this world for 12,000 years. They built great cities of white stone and green gardens. They created medicines that could cure any disease. They grew food that could feed billions. They believed that kindness was the highest form of strength. They never built a single weapon. Now they had come, and they understood their mistake. They did not care about kindness. They did not care about peace. They wanted the rare metals beneath the soil, and they were willing to kill every living thing on the planet to get them. Turned away from the window, the bunker was filled with government officials, scientists, and frightened children. They looked at her with hollow eyes. They wanted her to save them. She was the ambassador. She was supposed to talk to other species. She was supposed to find help. But no one in the galaxy wanted to help They were too powerful. No species wanted to anger them. Except one. Walked to the communication station, where a young technician named sat hunched over ancient equipment. The main communication towers had been destroyed in the first wave of attacks. Only this old backup system remained. "Can you send a message to the humans?" asked. Looked up at her with tired eyes. The humans, ambassador, they are so far away, and they are a young species. They have only been in space for 200 years. What can they do against Did not have an answer. She only knew that 30 years ago, when the first made contact with humanity, the humans had been kind. They had sent doctors to help during a plague. They had shared food during a famine. They were strange creatures, full of contradictions, but they had never turned away from those who asked for help. "Send the message," said. "Tell them we need medical supplies. Tell them we need evacuation ships. Tell them anything. Just make them understand that we are dying." Nodded slowly and began working on the equipment. His fingers moved across the controls with desperate speed. Outside, another explosion shook the ground. Dust fell from the ceiling. Closed her eyes and prayed to gods she no longer believed in. Far across the galaxy, Captain stood on the bridge of the HSS Resolve and stared at the stars. He was a tall man with gray hair and a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw. He had earned that scar 20 years ago during the unification wars on Earth, when humans still fought each other instead of exploring the stars. Those days were over now. Humanity had united under one government and reached out into the galaxy. They discovered they were not alone. They found hundreds of species, some friendly, some hostile, most indifferent. Commanded a small patrol fleet at the edge of human territory. His job was simple: watch the border, report anything unusual, and avoid trouble. It was boring work for a man who had spent his youth fighting wars. His second-in-command, Lieutenant, approached him with a tablet in her hands. She was younger than him by 15 years, with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. "Captain, we received a strange transmission," she said. "It came from very far away, the system." Raised an eyebrow. I remember them, peaceful people, good doctors, what do they want?" Handed him the tablet. "See for yourself." Read the message. It was written in simple galactic common, but the words hit him like a hammer. They was under attack. They were destroying their cities. Billions had already died. They needed medical supplies. They needed evacuation ships. They needed anyone who would listen. They needed help. Read the message 3 times. His hands began to shake, not from fear but from something older, something darker. Rage. "How long would it take to reach the system?" he asked. Blinked. "Captain, that is not our territory. We have no authorization to." "How long, Lieutenant?" Hesitated. 14 hours at maximum speed. Turned to face his bridge crew. There were 12 men and women watching him with confused expressions. They were patrol officers. They were not trained for combat. They had families waiting for them back home. "I am going to say something," announced. "And after I say it, anyone who disagrees can return to their quarters with no punishment. I will not force anyone to follow me." The bridge fell silent. "They are dying. A species that has never hurt anyone is being murdered by the—" They sent us a message asking for medical supplies. They did not ask for warriors. They did not ask for battleships. They asked for bandages and doctors. Paused, his scar seemed to burn on his face. "But I am not going to send them bandages. I am going to bring them 12 battleships. I am going to save as many of them as I can. And I am going to make them regret the day they thought they could murder innocents while the galaxy watched and did nothing." No one moved, no one spoke. Then stepped forward. "Captain, this will be considered an act of war. Earth Command has not authorized this mission. You could be court-martialed. We could all be court-martialed." "I know," said. "They have 300 warships in that system. We have 12. "I know. We will probably die." Looked at her. For a moment, he saw himself as a young soldier again, watching his friends die in muddy trenches on Earth. He had sworn then that he would never watch innocent people suffer if he could do something about it. They asked for help. They trusted that someone in this cold, dark galaxy would answer them. I will not let them die thinking that no one cared. Stared at him for a long moment. Then she smiled just a little. "Well then, Captain, I suppose we should prepare the fleet." One by one, every crew member on the bridge nodded. No one left. No one asked to stay behind. Turned back to the stars and gave the order. "Set course for the system, maximum speed, and tell the other ships to load their weapons." The HSS Resolve jumped into hyperspace, and 11 battleships followed. They had asked for medicine. They were about to receive something very different. Supreme Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conqueror, and watched the world burn. He felt nothing. This was the 47th species he had conquered in his long career. They were all the same in the end. They begged, they screamed, they died. They had been easier than most. They had no weapons, no soldiers, no will to fight. They simply ran and hid like frightened animals while his ships turned their beautiful cities into ash and glass. His second officer, a young named, approached him with a report. "Supreme Commander, the orbital bombardment is 92% complete. We estimate full planetary pacification within 6 hours. Nodded slowly. "Excellent. Begin landing parties in the northern continent. The mineral surveys indicate the richest deposits are there." "Yes, Supreme Commander. Also, we have detected incoming ships." Turned his head. "Incoming ships from where?" "Unknown origin. They will arrive in approximately 4 minutes. Felt a small spark of curiosity. Who would be foolish enough to interfere with a conquest? Perhaps they had called for help from one of their trading partners. Some small species hopping to negotiate or beg for the survivors. "How many ships?" asked. 12, Supreme Commander." Laughed. 12 ships. He had 300. Whoever these fools were, they would learn their mistake quickly. "Let them come," he said. "If they want to die with we will grant them that wish." 4 minutes later, 12 ships dropped out of hyperspace. Watched them appear on his tactical display. They were not like any ships he had seen before. They were ugly, blocky things, covered in metal plates and weapons. They had no grace, no elegance. They looked like they had been built by creatures who knew nothing about proper ship design. But something about them made uncomfortable. They were not running. They were not hiding. They were moving directly toward his fleet in a tight formation, like predators stalking prey. His communication officer spoke up. "Supreme Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the unknown ships." "Put it through." A voice filled the bridge. It was calm, steady, and spoke in perfect galactic common. "Fleet, this is Captain of the Terran Republic Navy. You will cease all hostile operations immediately and withdraw from this system. You have 60 seconds to comply." Silence fell over the bridge. Every officer stared at the display in disbelief. Terran Republic Navy, humans, had heard of them, a young species from a small planet called Earth. They had only been in space for 2 centuries. They were considered primitive by galactic standards. Aggressive, yes, but not a threat to anyone important. And now 12 of their ships were ordering 300 warships to retreat. Began to laugh. It started as a chuckle and grew into a roar that echoed across the bridge. His officers joined him, filling the room with cruel amusement. 60 seconds, said when he could speak again. This human gives us 60 seconds. Does he not know who we are? Does he not understand that they have conquered half the galaxy? Was smiling. Shall I order the forward destroyers to eliminate them, Supreme Commander? Yes, said. Show these humans what happens to those who threaten the Empire. 20 destroyers broke formation and accelerated toward the human fleet. They were fast ships, built for exactly this kind of work. They would tear the humans apart in seconds. The human ships did not move. They did not run. They simply waited. Watched with satisfaction as his destroyers closed the distance. 10,000 kilometers, 8,000, 5,000. The lead destroyer fired. And then it exploded. Blinked. One moment his destroyer was there. The next moment it was a cloud of burning metal and frozen bodies. He had not even seen what hit it. A second destroyer exploded, then a third, then a fourth. The human ships had not moved. They had not even changed formation. They were simply sitting there and ships were dying around them. What is happening? Demanded. Report. Was staring at his display with wide eyes. Supreme Commander, the humans are using some kind of projectile weapon. Our sensors can barely detect the rounds. They are moving at nearly 12% the speed of light. 12% the speed of light. Felt something cold settle in his stomach. Weapons were fast, but nothing moved that quickly. By the time their sensors detected the human rounds, the rounds had already hit their targets. 15 destroyers were gone now. The remaining 5 turned and ran back toward the main fleet. The human voice returned, 52 seconds remaining. Was no longer laughing. He was staring at the tactical display, watching the scattered remains of his destroyers drift through space. Supreme Commander said quietly, "What are your orders?" Straightened his back. He had not survived 47 conquests by being a coward. These humans had surprised him, but they were still outnumbered. They would still die. All ships, he commanded. Attack formation, destroy those human vessels, leave no survivors. 300 warships began to move. On the bridge of the HSS Resolve, Captain watched the enemy fleet advance. His face was calm, but his heart was pounding. This was the moment of truth. They were, and far from home. Lieutenant stood beside him, reading the tactical data. They are coming in fast, Captain. All 300 ships. Good, said. That means they are scared. Looked at him, scared. They outnumber us 25-1. And they just lost 15 destroyers in 12 seconds. They expected us to run. We did not. Now they have to prove they are not afraid of us, and scared enemies make mistakes. Opened a channel to his fleet. All ships, this is the captain. Remember your training, remember why we are here. Those creatures down there on that burning planet, they trusted us. They believed that humans would come. We will not let them down. He paused. Break formation, hunt in packs, make them pay for every centimeter of space. The 12 human battleships scattered like wolves separating to chase prey. They dove between asteroids, used debris as cover, and began to move in patterns that seemed almost random. But there was nothing random about it. Human ships were not designed for elegant combat. They were designed to survive. Their hulls were thick with armor. Their crews were trained to endure forces that would kill any other species, and their weapons were built for one purpose, to destroy anything they hit. The first cruiser died when the HSS Soul dropped from behind an asteroid and fired 3 rounds through its engine core. The second cruiser died when the HSS rammed through its shields with a concentrated plasma burst. Watched his ships die and felt the cold in his stomach spread to his chest. These humans were not fighting like civilized species. They were fighting like animals, like monsters. They were fighting to win. "Supreme Commander," said, his voice trembling, "we have lost 63 ships." Said nothing. He simply stared at the tactical display and watched the humans tear his fleet apart. For the first time in his long career, Supreme Commander was afraid. Ambassador had lost count of the hours she spent in darkness. The bunker shook with explosions. The lights flickered and died. Children cried in the corners while their parents held them close and whispered lies about how everything would be okay. Then the explosion stopped. Lifted her head. The silence was more terrifying than the noise. Silence meant the bombardment was over. Silence meant they had finished destroying everything above ground. Silence meant the landing parties would come next. She stood on weak legs and walked to the bunker entrance. Other survivors watched her with empty eyes. They knew what she was doing. She was going to see the end. The bunker door was heavy and old. It took 3 people to push it open. Stepped outside and looked up at the sky. It was full of fire and smoke, but through the darkness she could see lights. Dozens of lights burning and falling. Ships were dying up there. But whose ships? A roar cut through the silence. Looked to the east and saw shapes descending through the clouds. Her heart stopped. Landing craft, they were coming. But the ships did not look like vessels. They were blocky and gray, covered in markings she did not recognize. They landed hard, throwing up clouds of ash and dirt. Doors opened and figures emerged. They were not. They were humans. Stood frozen as the creatures approached. She had seen humans before, 30 years ago when they first made contact. They had seemed friendly then, curious, eager to learn. These humans were different. They wore heavy armor covered in weapons. Their faces were hidden behind helmets with dark visors. They moved like soldiers, scanning the area with raised guns. One of them approached. The human was shorter than the others, but moved with confidence. It stopped a few meters away and removed its helmet. A female face appeared. Young, perhaps 30 by human standards, with short black hair and tired eyes. A scar ran across her chin. "Ambassador," the human asked. Could not speak, she simply nodded. "I am Sergeant of the Terran Marine Corps. We are here to help." Found her voice. "Help, we only asked for medical supplies. We did not ask for soldiers." Smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Where we come from, you do not send doctors into a without soldiers to protect them." She turned and waved at the other humans. They began unloading crates from the landing craft, expected weapons, ammunition, machines of war. Instead, she saw food, water purifiers, medical equipment, tents and blankets. "I do not understand," said. "You brought weapons and medicine, both." Looked at her with those tired eyes. "We brought everything you need to survive, Ambassador, and everything we need to make sure you keep surviving." More landing craft arrived. Hundreds of humans poured out, spreading across the destroyed landscape. Some carried guns, others carried stretchers. Doctors worked beside soldiers. Engineers worked beside medics. Watched them with growing confusion. "Why are you doing this? We are strangers to you. We are not allies. We have nothing to offer you." Was quiet for a moment. Then she pointed up at the sky, where the lights of battle still flickered. "Do you see those ships up there? 12 battleships, 2,000 humans. They came here knowing they might die. They came here without orders from our government. They came here because your people sent a message asking for help." She looked at. "Humans have a saying, Ambassador. When someone asks for help, you help them. You do not ask what they can give you in return. You do not calculate the cost. You simply help, because that is what makes us human. Felt tears forming in her eyes. She had believed the galaxy was cold and cruel. She had believed that no one would care about She had been wrong. Above them, the battle continued. Captain stood on the bridge of the HSS Resolve and watched his tactical display with burning eyes. They had been fighting for 6 hours. His fleet had destroyed over 100 ships, but they had lost 3 of their own. 3 ships, 300 humans, gone. Lieutenant worked beside him, coordinating the remaining vessels. Her voice was hoarse from shouting orders. Captain, the HSS is taking heavy fire. They have lost their main engines. Tell them to fall back behind the debris field. Have the HSS provide cover. Yes, Captain. They were adapting. They had stopped attacking in large groups. Now they hunted the human ships in smaller packs, trying to overwhelm them with numbers. It was working. Slowly, the tide was turning. Knew they could not win this battle alone. They needed help. They needed reinforcements. But reinforcements were 14 hours away, and he was not sure they would last 14 more minutes. Captain said suddenly, new contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Felt his stomach drop. More, if the enemy had called for reinforcements, it was over. They would all die here. Then he saw the identification codes. His heart began to beat again. Lieutenant confirmed those contacts. Stared at her display. Her voice shook when she spoke. Confirmed, Captain. 47 Terran Republic warships. It is the Second Fleet, Admiral commanding. Closed his eyes. Earth Command had received his message. They had not stopped him. They had not ordered him to retreat. They had sent backup. A familiar voice crackled through the communication system. Admiral was an old man, older than, with a voice like gravel. Captain, this is Admiral. You started a war without permission. Opened his eyes. Respectfully, Admiral, I finished one. There was a pause, then laughed, a rough sound that filled the bridge. Well said, Captain. Now move aside and let us clean up this mess. The Second Fleet advanced into the battle like a hammer falling on glass. 47 battleships joined the remaining 9, creating a wall of fire and metal that they could not penetrate. Supreme Commander watched his fleet die and finally understood the truth. The humans had not come here for glory. They had not come for territory or resources or political advantage. They had come because someone asked for help. And they would not stop until every last ship was destroyed. On the ground, heard the cheers from her communication device. The battle was turning. The humans were winning. She looked at Ambassador, who was helping distribute food to survivors. Ambassador called, "Good news from orbit." Walked over, her white robe stained with ash and blood. What news? Reinforcements arrived. They are retreating. Stared at her. Retreating, they are leaving. Shook her head slowly. No, Ambassador, they are trying to leave, but I do not think the Admiral is going to let them. Looked up at the sky. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the creatures who had murdered billions of her people were dying. She should have felt satisfied. She should have felt grateful. Instead, she felt afraid. What kind of species were these humans? They showed kindness to strangers and cruelty to enemies. They brought medicine and death in the same ships. They smiled while helping children and killed without mercy. They were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, and was not sure if that was a good thing or a terrible thing. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the HSS Unity, and studied the tactical display. The battle was nearly over. The fleet had been reduced from 300 ships to less than 50. They were scattered, broken, running in all directions. Running was pointless. Had positioned his ships in a sphere around the combat zone. There was nowhere to escape. His communication officer spoke. "Admiral, the flagship is hailing us." "Put it through." The flickered and a face appeared. Recognized him from intelligence reports. "Supreme Commander, the butcher of 47 worlds, the monster who had killed billions of innocent people. Looked different now. His scales were pale, his eyes were wide. He looked like a creature who had seen death approaching and could not stop it. "Human Admiral," said, "I am prepared to negotiate surrender terms." Said nothing, he simply watched the commander squirm. "We will withdraw from this system immediately," continued. "We will release all prisoners. We will pay reparations to your government. We will sign any treaty you require." Still remained silent. "Please," said, and there was something in his voice that had never heard from before. Fear, pure, desperate fear. "We surrender. What more do you want?" Leaned forward in his chair. "Supreme Commander, do you know why I am here?" Blinked. To stop our conquest." "No," said, "I am here because of a message. A simple message from Ambassador to a small human patrol fleet. She asked for medical supplies. She asked for evacuation ships. She asked for help." Stood up. "She did not ask us to come here. She did not expect warships. She expected doctors and medicine, because that is what civilized people send when others are suffering. She trusted that someone in this galaxy would care enough to help." His voice grew colder. "And while she waited, hoping someone would answer, you were burning her cities. You were murdering her people. You were destroying everything they built over 12,000 years." Opened his mouth but continued. "They never hurt anyone. They never threatened the Empire. They simply existed peacefully, asking nothing from the galaxy except to be left alone. And you killed them by the billions for minerals, for profit, for glory." Walked closer to thee until his face filled the display. "You ask what I want, Supreme Commander. I want justice. But there is no justice for what you have done. No treaty can bring back the dead. No reparations can rebuild what you destroyed. No surrender can undo the horror you inflicted on innocent people." He stepped back. "So I will take the only thing I can take. I will take your fleet. I will take your ships. I will take every in this system who followed your orders and burned children in their homes." Was trembling now. "You cannot do this. There are rules. There are galactic laws. You cannot simply execute prisoners." "You are not prisoners," said. "You are war criminals, and where I come from we have a simple rule for war criminals." He turned to his weapons officer. "Destroy them all." The communication cut off. His terrified face disappeared from the. Across the combat zone, human ships opened fire, roared, missiles flew. Plasma burned through hulls like fire through paper. The remaining ships tried to run. Some tried to fight. A few tried to surrender, broadcasting desperate pleas for mercy. No mercy came. In 47 minutes it was over. 300 ships had been reduced to floating debris. Escape pods that launched were tracked and destroyed. No survivors were permitted. On the bridge of the HSS Unity, Admiral watched the last ship explode. Supreme Commander died somewhere in that blast, his flagship torn apart by human weapons. Captain's voice came through the communication system. "Admiral, the fleet has been eliminated. All enemy vessels destroyed." "Confirmed, Captain. Good work." There was a pause, then asked, "Admiral, was this the right decision? We killed thousands of, many of them were just soldiers following orders." Considered the question. He was an old man. He had seen many wars. He knew that violence created more violence, that hatred bred more hatred. But he also knew that some crimes could not be forgiven. Some monsters could not be allowed to escape. "Captain, do you know what they would have done if we let them go?" "No, Admiral." "They would have returned to their empire as heroes. They would have told stories about how they conquered the. Other commanders would have heard those stories and thought, if I do the same, I will be celebrated too. The cycle would continue. More species would die." Sat back in his chair. "Today, we sent a different message. Today, we told the galaxy that there is a price for genocide. We told every empire, every warlord, every tyrant who thinks they can murder innocents without consequences that the humans are watching, and the humans remember. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I understand, Admiral. Good, now get down to that planet and help the survivors. That is why we came here after all. On the surface of the ambassador stood in the ruins of what had once been her capital city. Human engineers moved through the rubble, searching for survivors. Human doctors treated the wounded in makeshift hospitals. Human soldiers stood guard at every corner, watching for threats that no longer existed. Sergeant found standing alone, staring at the sky. The battle was over. The flashes of light had stopped. They were gone. Ambassador said, Are you all right? Did not turn around. I watched the battle, Sergeant. I watched your ships destroy I watched you kill every single one of them. Said nothing. I should feel grateful, continued. You saved us. You saved what remains of my people, but I cannot stop thinking about what I saw, the violence, the destruction. You killed them without hesitation, without mercy. She finally turned to face. Your people are so violent, Sergeant, so brutal. How can you be so kind to us and so cruel to them? Was quiet for a moment. Then she walked over and stood beside, looking up at the same sky. Ambassador, let me tell you something about humans. We are violent. We have always been violent. For thousands of years, we killed each other over land, over resources, over ideas. We invented weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We came very close to ending ourselves. She paused. But we also invented medicine. We invented art and music and stories. We built cities and schools and hospitals. We learned to love, to forgive, to help each other. We carry both things inside us, the violence and the kindness. Looked at. The difference, Ambassador, is that we choose who receives our violence and who receives our kindness. They chose to hurt innocent people. They chose to murder your species for profit, so they received our violence. She gestured at the human engineers and doctors working in the ruins. Your people chose to help others. You chose to create medicine and grow food. You never hurt anyone, so you receive our kindness. Stared at her. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, said. Be kind to those who deserve kindness. Be violent to those who hurt the innocent. That is the human way. Looked back at the sky, where human ships now orbited peacefully over her broken world. Perhaps, she thought, the galaxy needed creatures like humans. Perhaps it needed beings who could be both angels and demons, depending on who they faced. Perhaps kindness needed violence to protect it. She did not know if that was wisdom or madness, but she knew one thing for certain. She was glad the humans had come. 3 months passed after the Battle of Prime. In that time, the galaxy changed forever. The Empire, unconquered for 10,000 years, collapsed in weeks. Without Supreme Commander and his core fleet, their military was broken. The dozens of species they had enslaved saw their chance and took it. Rebellions spread across territory like fire through dry grass. And wherever those rebellions struggled, human advisory teams appeared. They never fired the first shot, but they always fired the last one. The other great powers of the galaxy watched with growing unease. The humans had been in space for only 2 centuries. They were supposed to be a young, primitive species, barely worth noticing. Now they had destroyed the most powerful fleet in the quadrant and toppled an ancient empire. All because a small, peaceful species had asked for help. Ambassador stood before the Galactic Council and looked out at the assembled representatives. There were hundreds of species here, from the to the gaseous to the robotic. They filled the great hall like a garden of alien life. They were all watching her, waiting to hear what she would say. Took a deep breath. Her world was still in ruins. Billions of her people were dead, but they were rebuilding. Human engineers had constructed new power systems. Human doctors had saved countless lives. Human soldiers still patrolled the streets, protecting the survivors from opportunistic raiders. They would survive because of humans. 3 months ago, my world was dying. They burned our cities and murdered our people. We had no weapons to fight them. We had no allies to call upon. We were alone. She paused. So I sent a message. A simple message to a species we had met only once 30 years before. I asked for medical supplies. I asked for evacuation ships. I asked for anything they could spare to help us survive. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. I expected perhaps a few cargo ships, a handful of doctors willing to risk the journey, maybe nothing at all. After all, we had nothing to offer in return. We were strangers to them. Why would they help us? Smiled, and there was wonder in her eyes. 12 human battleships arrived within hours. They flew across the galaxy, without permission from their government, without any guarantee of success. They attacked 300 warships with only 12 of their own. 2,000 humans risked their lives to save a species they had never met. She looked directly at the remnant delegation. They sat in the far corner of the chamber, a handful of diplomats from a shattered empire. They would not meet her eyes. I have learned something about humans in these 3 months, continued. They are not peaceful. They are not gentle. They carry violence in their blood like other species carry breath. Their history is written in war and conquest and destruction. The council was silent. But they have made a choice they renew with every generation. They have chosen to use their violence to protect the innocent. They have chosen to use their strength to help the weak. They have chosen to answer when others call for help. She turned back to the delegation. And they have chosen to punish those who prey upon the helpless. The representatives seemed to shrink in their seats. So I say this to every species in this chamber, every empire and republic and federation listening to my words. If you are kind, if you are peaceful, if you mean no harm to others, the humans will be your friends. They will send doctors to heal your sick. They will send engineers to build your cities. They will send teachers to educate your children. Her voice hardened. But if you are cruel, if you hurt the innocent, if you think you can murder and conquer without consequence, then pray you never meet humans, because they will remember what you did, and they will come for you. She finished speaking and stepped back. The council chamber erupted in noise. Some species applauded, others shouted questions. A few simply sat in stunned silence. In the corner, the delegation quietly left the chamber. Far away, on the bridge of the HSS Resolve, Captain watched the broadcast. His ship was stationed permanently in the system now, part of a protective fleet that would remain as long as needed. Lieutenant stood beside him, watching the same broadcast. The ambassador speaks well, said. Nodded slowly. She has learned much about us. Do you think she is right about who we are? Considered the question. He thought about his years as a soldier. He thought about the friends he had lost, the enemies he had killed, the choices he had made. Humans are complicated. We can be kind and cruel, brave and cowardly, wise and foolish. We contain multitudes, as one of our old poets once said. He watched finish her speech on the. But I think she understood the important part. We choose who we are. Every day, every moment we choose. And when someone asks for help, we choose to answer. Smiled slightly, even when it means fighting 300 ships with 12. Especially then. The broadcast ended, turned back to the viewport and looked at the stars. The hung below them, still but healing. Human ships moved through orbit, carrying supplies and personnel. Somewhere out there, other species were watching, some with hope, some with fear. The galaxy would never be the same. The humans had announced themselves, not with diplomacy or trade or cultural exchange. With fire and mercy, delivered in equal measure. On the surface of the, Sergeant walked through a rebuilt marketplace. Children ran past her, laughing. Their parents watched with expressions that mixed gratitude and uncertainty. A young girl stopped in front of and held up a flower. It was small and purple, with delicate petals. "For you," the girl said. "Thank you for saving us." Knelt down and accepted the flower. She studied it for a moment, then looked at the girl. "What is your name?" Smiled. "That is a beautiful name. What does it mean?" "It means future in our language." Looked at the flower, then at the child, then at the sky where human ships maintained their eternal watch. "Future," she repeated. "I like that." She stood up and placed the flower carefully in a pocket of her armor. Around her, the marketplace continued its business. Merchants sold their goods. Human soldiers bought strange fruits and asked about local customs. Engineers discussed rebuilding projects with city planners. It was a strange sight. A species of warriors and a species of healers working together, learning from each other. Perhaps this was what the galaxy needed, thought. Perhaps this was why humans had come to the stars, not to conquer but to protect, not to dominate but to help. She did not know what the future held. She did not know if humans would always make the right choices, if they would always be kind to the innocent and harsh to the cruel. But she knew what they had done here, on this broken world, for this gentle species. They had answered a call for help. And they had proven that in the cold darkness of space, kindness still existed. Kindness protected by strength, mercy shielded by violence. The human way. Above, the captain received a new message from Earth Command. There was another species in trouble, another world facing destruction, another plea for help echoing across the stars. He did not hesitate. "Set course," he ordered, "maximum speed." The HSS Resolve turned toward the stars and jumped into hyperspace. The galaxy had learned a lesson. When you asked humanity for help, you did not always get what you expected. Sometimes you got something better.